Hey YouTube, Rook here from Rook Geek Goodness, my little channel in the web for all things geeky and cool. In this video, guys, is going to be another action figure review. We're going to be looking at the Pacific Rim 2 or Pacific Rim Uprising Gipsy Avenger Jaeger figure by Bandai or Tamashii Nations are actually putting out these wave of actual action figures. The original set of figures that came out for the very first Pacific Rim 1, was done by NECA, and they're much taller in scale and much more limited articulation. This is a very highly articulated figure. I actually picked this guy up before Toys R Us was on the liquidation rise that happened a few weeks back. I got this guy basically before the liquidation sale hit. You can actually get him at your Toys R Us for about $20 US. They had two other Jaegers. Those were a little bit bigger, more bulky, more stockier versions of the actual Jaegers, the big robots that you see in Pacific Rim 2. A very, very good movie. I actually did see that movie about a week or so ago. I highly recommend anyone who likes big robots, big monsters, definitely take a look at the Pacific Rim 2 Uprising movie. But of course, this is the side Jaeger Gipsy Avenger, probably the main hero unit in the actual movie itself. Very, very cool toy. I highly recommend it, at least so far as the beginning of this video goes. You know I'm going to like this actual robot. So what we're going to do is do a full breakdown of this guy. We're going to talk about a breakdown segment, and we're going to look at the packaging as a whole. We're going to look at the paint, the articulation, and the accessories, and conclude the video and final thoughts for you, the viewer. Should you actually spend the money to get yourself the Pacific Rim Uprising Bandai Tamashii Nations Gipsy Avenger figure? Stay tuned, guys. We'll go to a breakdown. Alright guys, we're in a breakdown segment looking at the Pacific Rim Uprising Bandai Tamashii Nations Side Jaeger Gipsy Avenger figure. Of course, first thing we always do is look at the packaging and presentation when we're in a breakdown segment. It's a very, very cool packaging. Very small, very squat packaging. It's not very big, not very large. It's barely able to fit in my frame here as I got it all framed in for you. It's a really cool packaging. How they did it. Nice little window box. So you can see the Gipsy Avenger figure within here. At the top here, I'll get a little closer. You see Pacific Rim Uprising. You have Robot right here at the top. I'll pull back a little bit so you can see it still. We have a nice shot of Gipsy Avenger here. It does say Gipsy Avenger down here. You have the Bandai Tamashii Nation logos right here. On this side, we have a shot of Gipsy Avenger. On this side, we have the Gipsy Avenger sort of lettering and logo with the robot spot listed right there as well. I think this is the Robot Spirit Side Jaeger listed right here on the side. And on the back is pretty cool, actually. I'll kind of go down a little closer to the camera so you can see it does say Gipsy Avenger here. It has a small little write-up about Gipsy Avenger. And some of the poses you can actually get the Jaeger in. It looks pretty cool what you can do with this figure. I think this is a really neat actual toy. I highly recommend this toy. You can tell I'm sort of gushing by this actual figure itself. I really love everything about this figure. There are some good points and some little small bad points. We'll talk about that in a second when we get this figure out of packaging. Alright guys, we have Gipsy Avenger out of packaging. The very first thing we always look at when we take something out of packaging is the paint and presentation. Looking at the actual paint aesthetics, it is the same color basically through the entire figure. This sort of lightish blue material with orange trim on the arms, the shoulder pads through like a stripe across the head. Both shoulders have it, the chest, and a little orange reactor you see right here. Legs are all gray with this bluish color with white trim, white stickers on the legs as well. Looks really, really cool from just a paint and presentation perspective. Let's actually look at that head sculpt. Head sculpt looks like Gipsy Avenger or the old school Gipsy Danger, if you remember the original Pacific Rim movie. Looks really, really cool. This yellow visor right there with the orange stripe going down the actual head like a mohawk. The orange reactor right here, which we saw, which is a nuclear reactor. We saw that in both Pacific Rim movies. Looks really, really good. He has sort of silver gunmetal in the actual chest right here. This chest piece right here goes gray on both sides with sort of blue in the middle. And it looks really, really good. I like how this figure actually looks really, really nice. Great amount of detail, great attention to detail on this figure. And there's some points I want to talk about when we go into the articulation, which we'll talk about in a second here, which sort of mimic some gears. Looks really, really cool. So let's take a look at articulation now. So the articulation is pretty sound on this figure. First off, head is on a ball joint, up and down movement, can spin 360 degrees with no hindrance of the articulation. The head can go back and forth as you see me moving it. It's sort of like on this floating ball joint. There's these floating ball joints all through this figure here. So let me show you this little ball joint. So you can go sort of this way or this way with the head. You see me shifting it back and forth a little bit. So it's kind of neat what you can do with it. Arms, here's a small problem with the arms here. The shoulder pads here are really, you can move them up and down and you can sort of lock them in place. There's like feels like a little like hinge where you can push this piece because the way it will move up and down on the arm, because the way it will hinge up and down. So you have to be very careful of these shoulder pads. They will go up and down as you see me doing here. That will lift and give clearance, but there are times where the shoulder pad side will pop off. You can just put it back on if you do see it happen. Range of motion, it can spin 360 degrees with no real hindrance, but you might run into a problem where this pauldron will pop off. So definitely take care of that. You have a double jointed elbow right here. The wrist will spin 360 degrees, and there is a ball joint here as well. These hands are interchangeable. We'll talk about more about that in a second. Waist is on a sort of floating rocker, as you see me moving back and forth with it. It can go about this far and about this far. You may be able to stretch it, but I'm not going to push any more extra pressure on the actual joint. So you can get upper rocker movement here on this top of this waist, which is pretty cool. The bottom part here is very, very weird. I'm playing with this more and more. It looks like he has, for lack of a better word, sort of this floating crotch joint where it can shift left and right on the legs. You can't really get it in the middle. It's sort of difficult to try to line up the legs. As you see me having a little difficulty kind of working through it here. There are joints on, like as you can see the joint right here, as you see me spinning around, this leg joint right here, that's what I'm talking about. Is sort of where the crotch is. Both the legs, I'll kind of showcase it here for you. I'll kind of push it in place so I can get the things back into center. 1 second here. There we go. So this joint is basically, it's on like a floating hip. That's the hard part to sort of get your head wrapped around. Because you can move these legs out much further, or you can actually move them, collapse them further up into the crotch area, depending on how you want to display the figure. So I do think it's a really, really cool idea. If we go down the rest of the figure here, you can kick out to about this far with no real issue. You do have a double jointed knee right here, and you have foot movement as well. You have up and down, you have left and right. You can spin it 360 degrees, almost 360. It gets a little caught on the little hinge at the bottom here, so definitely take note of these little kind of corners. You might get caught up on those corners. But one thing as you see me doing here is Gipsy Avenger can get into some really, really dynamic poses. I'm going to put some poses up for you guys so you can kind of see what it will look like. You see me kind of finagling a little bit, but I'm going to put him in some really cool poses and some cuts here so you'll kind of see what you can do with this guy. There's a ridiculous amount of articulation. Now, as I mentioned, there's some weird things with these gears. If you look on the back here, they look like they have molded gears in the back of the legs. So when you bend the leg, it sort of gives the illusion, because there's the way the hinges here, it looks like the gear is moving as well. It's giving the illusion of movement of gears, so that's like piston sculpted onto the back. So it's giving the illusion of more articulation, but when it really isn't that much when it causes the sculpted gears. I do like the way it looks. So let's talk about the accessories now for Gipsy Avenger. Alright guys, let's talk the accessories for Gipsy Avenger here. He comes with some decent accessories, some good, some not so good. First, let's talk about these hands. He has two interchangeable hands, sort of this open gripped palm, very similar to his closed fists as far as paint and detail goes. And to get these on, it's very, very easy. Bring Gipsy back into the position here. Here's the normal hand you have here. You basically just pop it off and you'll see a ball joint right there. You simply just plug the hand right into the ball joint, and this is the look you would get with the Gipsy Avenger with the palm open. This is the problem I have with the figure, is this weird palm like this. It's weird posed. I don't know why they went with these weird posed palms. I think that's probably the weakest portion of this figure, next to the weird, floating crotch hips here. That would be the only other issue I would really have with this. I wouldn't pose it with these hands, personally. I don't like them. I would just go back to the standard closed fist here, as you can see. Move those off to the side. We're going to need Gipsy in a second here. I'll move him right here. Next, we have these weird sort of wing things here. These are wing bits that go on the back of Gipsy Avenger here, and they only plug in really one way. I was kind of fiddling with it off camera, trying to get these in place, and it takes a bit of finagling to get it in place. Here's what one would look like. Those plug points I was telling you about, that's what you plug it in with. So basically, it only fits really one way, but it does take a bit of pressure to put them in. Once they're in, they're basically secured pretty tight, and that's kind of the effect you get with him. I don't remember in the movie these popping up and turning into weapons at all, so I don't know why they have these wings things attached to his back. I'm not 100% sure about that. Now we have the two main weapons for Gipsy Danger. First is the gravity sling. This is sort of the forearm piece that's exposed open for this weapon system. It is sort of translucent material in the front here with the sort of clawed open hand right here. This is actually causes the gravity sling weapon to be engaged. Basically, all this really is, technically, if you look at the actual figure itself, is this forearm exposed to make this weapon system happen. That's what happens in the actual movie itself. There is no posability for this piece. There is no articulation. Basically what you see is what you get. Now to get this on the figure, it takes a little bit of work because it's a little bit weird to put it in place. We'll talk about that in a second. His other weapon is a chain sword, which is his other hand. So basically this hand here, you'll see this little piece right here, which is this piece right here exposed. So the same type of idea happens here where this piece just basically comes off to make this weapon system. To get these on the figure is not easy. It's a bit tricky here, only because it's only meant to fit in one way. You can only put it in one sort of direction without screwing up. So I'm going to attempt to do it for you guys now. To put the actual weapons in, first thing you want to do is take this hand off, because you're going to put the hand on this thing here because there's a ball joint in place. You basically just put the hand on there, so it looks like the hand is on the actual weapon, on the chainsword. There is a lot of detail on the chainsword if you were curious, but there is no posability. It's just one solid piece. To get this to work, you literally pull the entire hand off the Jaeger. So it looks like this now. So now you have battle damage. That's kind of what it looks like to me. Now you have this piece off. To get this on is a bit confusing because it has this weird joint. I don't know if you can see it right there. Right there's a good pose for it. You see a sort of square and a little dash, which is the inside piece has that same piece. Now to get it is a bit tricky to put it in place. So hopefully I can get it in one take without wrecking the figure. Wait 1 second here. Hopefully I can do it. There we go. I think I got it. Yep, got it. So that's what it looks like with the chainsword in place. Holds really well. No issues with it. Very secure. I do like the way it looks. No problems, as you can see. Now, same deal with the actual other hand. To do that, same deal. You just literally pull the entire arm off. I haven't really seen toys that have the whole arm removed to put the interchangeable piece in place. It's very different. It takes a lot to get used to. I'm not used to it myself. Now, if you look here, same type of joint, as I mentioned before. Same type of joint inside here. To get it in place, again, same sort of deal. Hopefully I don't pop the shoulder pad off here. I popped it off earlier when I had to do a retake of it. I had to get it back in here. Like I said, it doesn't really stick as well as I want it to. That's just me not doing it. I heard a click there up to the mic. And then you'll get this sort of effect with the gravity sling out and the chain sword. So I think it looks really, really cool what you can do with this figure. I mean, you can get him into really cool poses. As you saw some of the spots I had in my light box, you can get him, you know, you can do some really, really cool stuff with this guy. He is extremely posable. I do like what you can actually do with this figure. So I highly, highly recommend the Gipsy Avenger figure if you can actually find one in your area. His sword is going right off the screen. I do apologize, but he looks really, really cool. So that being said, guys, let's go to final thoughts and wrap up this video. Alright guys, final thoughts on the Bandai Tamashii Nation Pacific Rim Uprising Side Jaeger Gipsy Avenger figure. That's a mouthful, I know. This is a really, really good figure. I highly recommend it. You can tell how I was gushing in the breakdown segment about this actual figure. It's really, really cool. It sort of fits in that big robot sense. Let's say if you're into big Transformers, let's say it's maybe a little bit bigger than a deluxe class, but maybe a tad smaller than a Voyager. I would definitely get this figure. Very good price point. Like I said, about $20 at the beginning of this video. I got it at my Toys R Us before the liquidation sale actually hit, which is kind of sad because our stock is almost all gone now. You might be able to locate this guy if you can actually find it for about at least 10%, maybe a little higher discount now because we're further along as far as their stock goes. I really, really recommend the Gipsy Avenger figure. I almost said Gipsy Danger, but Gipsy Avenger is basically the hero unit in the actual Pacific Rim 2 Uprising. I really like that movie. As I said again at the beginning of the video, it's really cool what you can do with the actual parts. It is a little weird. It maybe takes a little bit getting used to where you actually remove the arms to put the accessories in place. You're not just snapping in the chainsaw or snapping on the gravity sling. You're removing the entire forearm assembly and you're going to a peg point that's designed to only fit one way. So it takes a little bit to get accustomed to actually get used to that. I had to play around with it a little bit to figure out, oh, the joint only fits one way. I had to look inside of it. Okay, yeah, it only fits one way. But it's really cool how you can snap those pieces on and they're very secure. They're not going to they weren't loose, at least on mine. So you can basically hold the arm up and it's not going to just fall. And it's going to stay in place very, very well. Of course, the downside is after you snap that whole arm assembly off, you have another set of pieces of other arms that are sitting there that you have to put back into your box or put aside to be stored at a later time. I hate having extra pieces lying around. You guys know about that. Probably the biggest shortcoming I would say on this figure is the actual hands themselves. As I showed in the breakdown, the hands are in this weird gripped, pose where the ball joint is at the very, very back, and when you try to, let's say, move the arm up, you're going to pop it right off the ball joint. That, I think, is the bad shortcoming of this figure. I wish I had better hands. That would be the only issue I had as far with this figure goes. And maybe the shoulder pads, because when we move the arms up a little bit, the shoulder pad, the pauldron, will have a tendency to pop off. You can just snap it back on with no real issues. You're not breaking it. It's designed to basically come on and off to not hinder the articulation or the mobility. It does hinder it a little bit, but not too much. This thing is highly, highly articulated. That's one of the very good plus points of this figure. As you saw in the actual breakdown, I took some actual still shots of this guy in just weird, goofy poses. You can get him in really, really neat poses, and he holds the pose without any figure stands, which I really like about this figure. That's one of the big plus points on it. Super highly articulated, and I love that Bandai Tamashii Nation has done that with this actual figure. I definitely recommend it. If you're a fan, like I said, of Transformers, big robots, let's say Gundam, you would like stuff like this. It's a very, very cool figure. Highly, highly recommend getting at least a Gipsy Avenger action figure. I don't know about the other Jaegers. Some of them are hit and miss, but I think at least Gipsy Avenger, as far as this particular video goes, definitely buy this figure if you can locate it. I would definitely try, again, Toys R Us first to see if you can find it. Then I would go online, maybe check your Amazons, check your eBays, maybe even check your Walmarts or Targets. I don't know if it's, I'm not sure if this is exclusive. I don't want to say this is entirely exclusive to Toys R Us. I don't think it is. So you can probably get it anywhere, but definitely shop around for the best possible price point. Again, this guy here was $20 US. So I hope you like my video breakdown, video review of the Pacific Rim Uprising, Pacific Rim 2, of course, Gipsy Avenger Side Jaeger. And definitely click that like button bottom of the page. Click that subscribe button to be notified of my latest videos. When you subscribe to the channel, click the little bell icon to be definitely notified of my new uploaded videos and any type of new video content I put out. And last but not least, you can click Windows over here to watch more of my content. Take care, guys. I'll see you next video, and bye-bye.